Beat that. Hang on with me. I'm working on it. I can hear my what's up? Good how you doing? How you doing? It's wonderful to have you here. I don't like that at all. Feedback is something awful. I don't need it. I don't need it. It's annoying. What's up, guys? How is everybody doing? I am this is Michael Motley from One Minute Black History. Can y'all still hear me? Um, I'm glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. How is everybody doing? If you could let me know where you're from, today I didn't know I've been going live all week, especially on Substack. Yeah, it's just me today. There's nobody's coming to save me today. It's just me. Today we're going to go over and I know I created a book club and the book we're reading this month was Black is by a wonderful author named Michael Harriot. The whole idea here is that we read the book and then we talk about the points from the book, the high points, and kind of discuss it. We go over it and tell me what you think, how you enjoy the book, and we'll discuss it. So I ain't gonna keep. I'm not gonna waste your time. We're gonna go ahead and get started. And at any point, you can leave a note, kind of discuss it, and we just see where we go. See where we go from there. See where we are. All right. So I was trying. Hang on. I may have to close this. All right. All right. Is that better? I was hoping I was going to be able to peek in into Substack, but it's causing a ton of feedback. Ton of feedback. All right. Sorry about that. I was getting a lot of feedback. I tried to, so not to get too technical, but Substack is just a one-way stream. So I can stream to Substack, but I can't read comments back. And I was trying to be able to peek in into what is going on in via Substack, and I couldn't on my laptop anyway. So we're gonna work around it. It's okay. We're gonna work around it. I'm gonna probably have to have peek in on my phone and see what comments and what messages are being left on the Substack stream, but it's all right. Um, let's roll. Let's get it started. Like as you said. Let's go. All right. All right. All right. So Black AF History is the book that we're reading, and first and foremost, it's a wonderful book. I enjoyed it greatly. Uh, it is a very dense book. Like it's not a hard read. It's not particularly long. It's about 350, 400 pages, and I don't think you don't find very many history books that are very too much longer than about 300 pages. You can usually get your point across. Like this doesn't. It doesn't have to be Lord of the Rings or the Iliad for a history book, but it is a lot being encompassed in these pages. Like every single book, especially early on, it jumps around a lot, specifically like back and forth between the English colonies and the Portuguese and the Spanish. And it's a little jarring at first to try to okay, just a minute ago, we were in Virginia colony, and now we're talking about, the Portuguese and Christopher Columbus and America versus Fucci. And it's a lot. It's a lot going on. It's a hard to ingest. I struggle with it a little bit, but once you get through pretty much about around chapter 3, once you get to locked in on America, it really, really hits its stride. Um, but one thing I like about this book is it's basically like the overarching theme is that every chapter is about agency versus victimhood. And with Black people, and we deal with this a lot today, is that we're tired of seeing movies or TV shows where we're portrayed as the victims, constantly the victims. We're tired of trauma. People are exhausted with slavery, with movies about slavery. And one thing, at least I try to do on my channel, but also just in general, people want to see things where how we reacted to a situation, what did we do when faced with difficult circumstances? What do we do in the face of that instead of like a lot of trauma? And this is one thing this book does extremely well is it basically explains how we dealt with these situations and frame Black people as, engineers and navigators as opposed to just being unskilled labor in this picture, in this, you know, um the history of this nation. Also, one thing he's extremely good at here is that there's a lot of receipts. A lot of receipts. Like you can see, hey, I got this here. You can read this. If you're reading the digital book has these little notes, and sometimes it's just a source, a cited source. But a lot of times it'll give you additional information. Like you click on that, and it'll go even more in depth into a subject or an area, and it's wonderful. I enjoyed that part greatly because I always felt like I was getting a nugget, another nugget within this story that within the book. um Another one of the big picture items is about humanity, is about us struggling to um the fight for our own humanity. He talks about a lot in his book about how when freedom fighters, the Revolutionary War, Davy Crockett, all these guys, the Civil War, and how when white people were faced with the idea of fighting for their freedom, they framed this. I always framed this the heroes, but when Black people, when they were escaping enslavement or when they were uprising against enslavement, they were always framed as like evil and deviant. And they even had a medical term for it. They used to call it drapetomania. This was the need for an enslaved person to free captivity, which now 2026, that feels very ridiculous. But also the fact that you believe this, the fact that this is what you thought, whatever, man, whatever. So yeah, these are the major points. The overarching theme is mostly about like, hey, agency, uh, uh, um, us to fight for our humanity, and just reframing the narrative that we weren't just passive participants in this history, we were active participants. And you can make an argument, um built this country. Like we weren't the labor of this country, we were the engineers. We just, our role in this country has been whitewashed out, so you don't get to see it, that you don't actively get to see it, but it's in your face on a regular basis, on an absolute regular basis. It's one of the things that I try to reflect on. And one thing I'm trying to be very cognizant of with my stories is showing us, and not just a positive light, but in our reaction to how we were treated, how we've been done within this country. So like, hey, not just enslavement, not just a sad day, but oh, we did this. And so for instance, like I did a note recently where I talked about the Montgomery bus boycott and how, not just how it was set up, and Rosa Parks and 26-year-old preacher from Alabama, but how during that bus boycott, they created an Uber-like system to bus people where they needed to go to get you to work, to get you back, and it was insured by Lloyd's of London. They had dispatchers and about 300 so cars that would come pick you up and take you where you needed to go. These are the stories that you're trying to portray. This is the stories that this book talks about. This is what we're trying to move towards, at least with history. I want you to, not just understand the incident, but like a total picture of us within this space. Anyway, so now we're going to talk about like the key moments. At least I'm gonna talk about the key moments in this book for a bit. One of the first parts of this is this basic idea of like foundational theft that happened through like the first three parts of this book, where it was basically like focusing on the colonies, early colonies, the English in the early colonies, the Portuguese and how they started the transatlantic slave trade, and then several key black conquistadors, navigators, primarily Juan Garrido, but there was another man, Esteban, who was also in that story. Like when he talks about Jamestown, he frames the people, the English who first colonized Jamestown, as basically like they had no idea what they were doing. They were several hundred years behind the Spanish and the Portuguese in this attempt to conquer the New World, but also they did not send their best. They were sending people who had no idea what they were doing. They were ill-equipped to basically build the foundations of a colony in a brand new place with no infrastructure or no anything. So they ended up having to beg the native population for food. They were on the verge of starvation. A lot of people died. They were literally eating people in this colony, and the thing that made this endeavor worthwhile is that they found in Virginia that they could grow tobacco, and then they brought over a few enslaved Africans to help tend to their tobacco crop, because they weren't going to do it themselves. And this is the catalyst that basically created this place. They teetered on collapse, and they did, and they kept sending people, and they would collapse and come back. And even before it was, I guess, a successful colony, for lack of a better word, they were getting ready to starve, and they were able to basically find something that worked, something that was profitable in tobacco in Virginia, and then that's like, hey, they're off and running. It's kind of an accident. It was kind of an accident. But even when he frames like the Portuguese, so like the whole idea behind the transatlantic slave trade, when they go into talking about the Portuguese, was basically they just had to clear it with the church. They were able to convince the church that they could enslave anyone that wasn't Christian, and because they were Catholic, and anyone that wasn't Christian, they were fair game. And honestly, one of the things you see that was the huge difference between Portuguese, Spanish enslavement and English enslavement, is they didn't have those barriers. They were not concerned with their Christianity. You could worship the same God as them, but that was not going to free you from enslavement. But early on, the Spanish and the Portuguese had this idea. One, they didn't do like forever. Like when you died, if you were enslaved, when you died, your kids were not enslaved. Like this wasn't perpetual enslavement. And also there was this idea that you could win your freedom if you converted to Catholicism. So it was slightly different from the chattel slavery that we had here in the United States. But the book kind of talks about that. It goes into the early idea of, while still allowing people to convert and not be enslaved if they converted to Catholicism, I needed a reason to, do this in my head by having you convert to Christianity. I mean, have you like, I can enslave savages. That's basically the idea. Like anyone that wasn't a Christian was a savage and lower than them. This is how you rectify this enslaving people, is that you have to frame them as not human. If I can't enslave somebody that I respect, I have to enslave someone that I don't think is another human being, And then it just gets worse from there with American chattel slavery. One of the interesting stories. This story is basically synopsis of the entire book, basically, because he talks about America Vespucci, who is the namesake of this country, North America, South America. America Vespucci was not a navigator. America Vespucci didn't discover anything. He was a fraud. He was a banker. He was a banker by trade, but he helped fund Christopher Columbus, and he was like, if he can do it, why not me? So he talked, Portuguese, the Spanish? I can't remember. It's been a while since I read the first chapter. But anyway, he convinced someone to fund an operation. And he was so inept at his job, he did not realize that he needed to name things. So when they founded what is now Brazil, and they found the Rio de Janeiro River, he did not know he needed to name things, so he named it the January River because they found it in January. Like that. That's what he was doing. He was so bad at his job, but then he was an extremely good salesman. So even though he was terrible at his job and all of the adventures that he went on were failures, he was able to convince people that he was this great navigator and that they should name the new world after himself. So even our namesake, the reason why we're here was a con man. And it's just kind of a synopsis of like this entire book. This entire book is basically built on con games. And of course, that's how you would get to start. This is how you would start things. It's exactly how you would start things. So one of the next parts in this book, and I talked about this, if you're on my Substack, I don't know if you read the newest article that I have, but I have an article about how enslaved black women used to braid rice into their hair and brought it over here to the American colonies. One of the things he talks about is how black folks taught the people of Charleston how to grow rice. So the people of Charleston, they were a British colony at the time, had no idea what they were doing. They tried to grow multiple different crops: silk, indigo, cotton. It was all failing. This was a damn near failed experiment. And the enslaved people that they had brought over rice and was growing rice, and they were like, "What is that? Why does that work?" And so they had this idea that we're gonna grow rice, but they didn't know how to do this in this environment. They didn't know how to tame the swamp. So they would invest in people from the rice coast of Africa, which is Senegal and Gambia today. Those cultures specialized in the growing of rice. They were a rice culture. They brought them over here, and even the book talks about like they had to adapt their techniques from Africa to this new environment because they weren't all coming from the same place. They all had their different techniques and the way they grew rice, and it was all different. So they had to come here and figure out things. How are we going to do this differently than we did it before? But basically, the idea was that they created these sluice gates that would use the rising tides that would flood these rice paddies while also keeping the seawater at bay. It would flood the rice paddies with fresh water, but also keep the seawater at bay. It was like it was actually genius. Anyway, the whole point being is that the malaria and yellow fever were running rampant through this because they're breeding grounds for water. That water, that moist atmosphere was a breeding ground for malaria and yellow fever. And the Africans Black people from Western Africa, because of their sickle cell trait, had developed a resistance to malaria. But the white planters had not. So if they went to these rice fields, it would kill them. They would kill them. They were dying by the thousands. So they would abandon their rice fields for 6 months a year. And what this did was create a completely separate type of enslavement that you don't see anywhere else in the Americas. It was a task-based system where if they were able to meet their quota of what needed to be done that day, they were free to do with the time that they will. Whatever the rest of that time was yours. And also, they weren't checking for you because I can't come here. I can't come to the rice plantation because I'm afraid of catching malaria. So they left them alone. And out of that grew this autonomy that you don't see anywhere else, in the South. And that created this culture that the Gullah Geechee people, specifically the Gullah people, that was the ones who were indigenous to that area, just breeds this culture that you still see in the Gullah people today, because they have this close connection to Africa. It wasn't broken like it was in other parts of the United States. They had this connection because they were being left alone. They were not subjected to the constant white gaze. So they just did, continue doing what they were doing. And that stuff, it stuck. It stuck with them. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see. It's so crazy because I have some friends that are from Charleston, and I didn't send them that story because I assumed they knew. But a friend of mine sent them the story, and they were like, "Oh, I had no idea. I didn't know this." This is one thing of like a page of like Black history and how it sucks that we can live these areas and we're not even really cognizant of the Black history that is all around us. But it also is awesome to see once again how they were adapted to a poor situation. Now, granted, Charleston Low Country was a unique experience. And I also would like to mention that while they were resistant to malaria, they were not resistant to yellow fever. And yellow fever was ravaging the Gullah population also. It significantly shortened their lifespan. They were, I don't think they lived past 40-ish, in an enslaved lifestyle. I don't know what the lifespan was for an enslaved person in the 1750s, but theirs was even shorter than that, which is kind of terrifying. Anyway, so this moves on and to the second part, which is basically like talking about freedom and how we reacted to that. This is during enslavement, prior to the Civil War, but after America was a country. So it starts by talking about drapetomania, which was a mental illness that caused enslaved people to run away. It's the most ridiculous thing, but ironically, drapetomania and malaria and our resistance to malaria are related because our resistance to malaria is what solidified in a lot of people's mind that we were medically different, that we weren't the same as white people, because that we were tougher and more resistant. And it's one of the big reasons why when you go to the doctor today and he thinks that you feel pain differently, or that you react to pain differently, or you have tougher skin, or all the lies that even doctors and nurses still believe today, is because of our resistance to malaria. It was like the thing, like I knew it. I knew they were different. And then you get a whole subgenre of medicine that just talked about how African slaves were different and treating your slaves. And this is where you get the creation of a mental illness like drapetomania, where they believe that it was this urge for people to run away. It's like, whatever, man. Yeah, they're basically creating a pseudoscience, to fit around their ideals that we weren't like them. This goes in to talk about a man by the name of Forrest Joe, who would raid plantations. And it's so we talk about like this whole idea of agency and people fighting back. Forrest Joe, this is a great story in his book because he was that dude. He was so scary that they thought he wasn't human. They used to tell stories about how Forrest Joe was superhuman, and the in the book they talked about how the Pineville, the white folks in that area that Forrest Joe lived in created the Pineville Police Association, which was one of the very first police agencies in the country, just to stop him, just to find him. We're gonna get this dude. So and the book doesn't talk about this a whole lot, but it insinuates, this is why one of the things about this book, it's great, is that it's kind of like a gateway to other things. You can read it and now you're like, oh, I want to learn more about this. He talks about just a little bit about how slave catching and this idea of keeping slaves in their place, or eradicating slave uprising, gave rise to the first police departments. It just, he talked about this in the context of the Pineville Police Association, which I think was in South Carolina. I think it's somewhere in South Carolina. But you can see that all over the country, that this was originally, they needed someone to hunt down their enslaved, put down rebellions, and those people just morphed into police department that we see today. Another part of this the middle part of this book is about the Black church and the rise of the Black church, and how it wasn't just for prayer, that it was logistics, and that a lot of the early Black churches, we're talking about early 1800s, before the Civil War, was dedicated to not only the abolishment of slavery, but they also were the people that funded a lot of the very, very first Black institutions. And he doesn't go, and he touches on it a little bit, because I know there's a narrative about it, Christianity being the white man's religion, or religion that was forced on us. But in reality, the reality is a bit different, because what actually happened is we adopted it. And very early on, they didn't even want us to be Christians. They didn't want us to be able to see. There are a lot of verses in the Bible that are counteractive to the narrative that they wanted to paint. And they didn't want us reading that book and figuring out that there should be a hoping for a better day when we weren't enslaved. That might put thoughts in your head that you might want to uprise. So early on, they didn't like that. And eventually they came around to the idea. I think this happens after the Revolutionary War, but what they did is they presented us with a enslaved Bible that cut out all of the parts about enslaved people rising up out of slavery. So you just know that Moses leading his people out of Egypt was gone. They cut all those parts out and left the parts in about that fit that narrative. But still, throughout all of this, Black people saw the good parts, the parts of it that we can use, and saw ourselves in this resurrection story, and how Jesus was able to overcome his death, and in us, we also can see a better day for ourselves in that. So a lot of the early Christianity was basically like us taking something that sucked and bending it to our will, bending it to our uses, making it fit what we needed it to fit. So I guess you could say that it was forced on us. It's the picture is a lot different. It's a bigger story, a bigger picture than just like, hey, this is what you're gonna read now. It's more of, we were a lot of different people from a lot of different areas with a lot of different religions. And when we came here after long periods of time, we became disconnected from the religion that we had in Africa, and we kind of had to adapt to what was available to us. Now, one of the good things he talked about in his book, and history doesn't talk about very much, is that a lot of the early Africans were Muslim. And because the Muslim people were more likely to be able to read, they were some of the earliest translators of the Bible to the Christian enslaved. And because of that, he talked about some of the traditions that we picked up. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember him mentioning about some traditions that we picked up from the Muslim population because of our close proximity. Because we lived together, we lived together, but we were from different areas, so it wasn't like we were a monolith. There were a lot of different people and a lot of different cultures were all kind of melting pot together. Anyway, we're moving forth. We're moving on. All right. So the next part is basically about moving into like emancipation, and that the book talks a lot about emancipation and the idea that Lincoln was only about preserving the Union. He could give a hot goddamn about enslaved people. It was never about enslaved people. If he could keep the Union preserved without freeing one enslaved person, he was going to do that. That was his major focus. The problem is that the Confederates, this is what they're here for. We're here, like in today's narrative, they'll tell you about states' rights, but it was the state's right to own people. Like they printed that in their reason for succeeding. South Carolina specifically said, "You won't let us have slaves. We want slaves. Therefore, we out." That's basically I paraphrase, but this is basically what that said. So, this passage talks a lot about us freeing ourselves once we saw an opportunity. And I skipped right over that, but it's okay. Even during the Revolutionary War, many of us were not patriots. Most of us were loyalists. Like vast majority of the black fighters in the Revolutionary War were with England because England promised us our freedom if we fought for that side. And this is the same thing that you see in the Civil War. Civil War was like, yo, I'm fighting for the side that's going to possibly get me out of here. And the people that enslaved me who are fighting for that are not the ones. So they would run away to Union lines if possible. And this forced them to create contraband policies. They considered as contraband. That's what they called us. Contraband policies, where basically if they came across a plantation from conquered lands, Union Army, they would free their enslaved people. They would free the people that they found. And this hurt the South more than anything because the South's economy was built on us. They had nothing else. They didn't have nothing else. Their entire economy. And right before the Civil War, I think they were the fourth largest economy in the world at the time because of the massive amount of human labor that they had and the agriculture that we were able to put forth. So when you start removing their manpower, they didn't just lose a person, they didn't just lose an asset. That was collateral. If it is the equivalent of someone coming by and confiscating your house or your car. Not only was a place that you lived in, but it was a place where I could get collateral against. I could get loans against. This was everything to them. Most of the white planters' money was tied up into us. It was us. When they lost everything. It was ass out. So this idea of taking contraband from them hurt them more than anything else. I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't see this. Like, this is the obvious answer. Like, looking back, and I know this is 2026, and I am not Abraham Lincoln, but you had to know. You had to know, right? I don't know. It seemed like a right answer. He said he was forced into the right answers. Like the answers would not coming to him. And then one day it's like, hey, maybe I should do this. Bro, that should have been the first idea. the first idea you had. Anyway, after the Civil War, there is a brief period where it was decent. It was about 20 or so years from 1865. I think Reconstruction ended in 1877-ish. It's a brief period where, one, the Southern economy was trash. And we just talked about why. Without us, they didn't have anything. While Southern planters called themselves planters, they weren't really planters. They didn't plant anything. They didn't know how to grow anything. They didn't know what they were doing. Like, all of their agricultural knowledge was tied up into us. We were the ones who had been doing this for several hundred years at this point. So they were so lost. They needed a way to get cheap labor. I have to get cheap labor on it. Now, if I can't enslave you, there has to be another way. It has to be another way to get you on board. And beginning Reconstruction, you can see that those screws tighten. This was where you started seeing vagrancy laws. You started to see the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the rise of white violence, the rise of lynchings, rise of black codes, all these things to try to put black folks in a slavery-like box. I need for you to be a welcome workforce. I need for you to be a welcome workforce. You see a rise of a lot of violence, especially with the idea of, I can't have you voting. I can't have you involved in politics. And all that culminated in 1877 with the Compromise of 1877, which basically was the North being like, yo, we out of the South business. We out of the, helping Negroes business, because they had put troops in a lot of areas, the worst areas, to kind of protect us from the rise of violence, especially with regards to like us attempting to vote. And in 1877, they were like, we out. We're good. It's called Compromise 1877. It basically settled this dispute about who was going to be the president, and then that compromise was, we're going to get out of the South business. I mean, you just let them do what they do. Let them go do. And this right here led directly into Jim Crow. You see, and this is where you start to see people like Ida B. Wells, who was, if you're not familiar with her, she is one of the greatest of our leaders, and doesn't get the pub, mostly because she was a woman, but also like she came from a time, it's so long ago. Like, she's not a person that's fresh in our minds, like, a Malcolm or Martin, but she also took a lot of slack because she was a woman. And during this time, she was one of the she was the leading person about lynching at the time. Like, nobody knew just how bad it was until she started chronicling this in her books. I think it was called the Red Wedding, and I can't remember the other one. Red Summer. I think it might be Red Summer. Either way, she has two books where she talks about, chronicling lynching, basically explaining how it was never punishment for a crime. It was basically about eliminating possible competition. I can't have you fighting for me for jobs. I can't have you thinking yourself as an equal. I need you to put you back in your place. I need you back as free labor. And and even to the point where she put herself on the line. Like, she was living in Memphis. She moved to Chicago, but she lived in Memphis for a long time. And she was running a newspaper. And one of her homies he ran a grocery store. Grocery store was competing against a white grocery store. And they just, one day they just had it. They just had it. I'm tired of competing with you. There was a catalyst, a fight, but they weren't involved in the fight. But that fight led to them lynching the grocers at that store. All this to say that she wrote a piece about it. Ida wrote a piece about it, and basically talked about how lynching was a lie. It was bullshit. And that the biggest lie, the biggest idea here in this lie was that it was to protect us, because they had this idea that we were sex fiends, that if we were ever left alone with a white woman, we just couldn't help ourselves but to attack her and rape her. So she wrote about that. She said the old threadbare lie that black men attack white women, and if the white men are not careful, basically she insinuated that they might find out that they actually like black men. And after she wrote this in the paper, they burned down her newspaper. They rioted in the streets and was waiting at the train station for her to come back. If she was out of town at the time, she was in New York. But they made it clear, like, bro, if you pull up to Memphis, we're gonna lynch you. This is the kind of power that she held. They were pissed. And that kind of brings us up 1890s or so within the book. And this starts us talking about Plessy versus Ferguson, which is the part that submits this separate but equal doctrine here in the United States. And Plessy versus Ferguson is interesting, not in its face, but because of the area that it happened in. And I didn't know this. This is where I really learned something, because this happens in New Orleans. And within New Orleans, they had a subclass called the Creoles. You're probably familiar with them, but you didn't realize that they were basically an intermediary between, like everywhere else in the South, things were very black and white. You were either white, or you were a slave. Now, granted, there were shades in there, but there was no subclass. Like, you could be as light as Sally Hemings, who was probably white, but because her mother was enslaved, she was a slave, she was black. I guess it was simple. But in New Orleans, the Creoles had created this subclass, this subgenre, and they were a mix of like Spanish influences, Native influence, black population, white planters, and they created this subgenre for themselves where basically they were not black, but they weren't quite white, and they could achieve things that were not possible by any other place, any other area. So when Louisiana had this separate car law, this law said basically that you had to have separate cars for Negroes and for white folks. It was very expensive. They were like, but I'm not a Negro. I'm a Creole. I'm different. So they challenged that law. They created something called the Citizens Commission, Citizens Commission, something to that effect. And basically we're like, we're going to challenge these laws because Creoles are different. But in effect, it was also helping black people. We're different. How do you treat us in this situation if we're not quite black? How does this work? How does this frame? And they got the railroad on board, because the railroads also realized, and this is one of the first times you see a corporation realize that segregation sucks. Because it was very costly to have two rail lines. If I should be able to put all of you guys in the same train car, if I have two separate train cars, that's two separate train cars I have to purchase. And that's trash. I don't want to do that. So they were on board. So they staged this entire thing where we got on this train car, and then they were arrested by fake police officers. And then they used that as a way to challenge the Louisiana segregation law. And they were hoping to get to integrate the bus line. What they got was separate but equal, which basically said that you can have separate facilities, but as long as they were equal. And man, I want to tell you, if you're bored one day, if you just want to read the excerpts from the Supreme Court after Plessy versus Ferguson, it is fucking ridiculous. I think one of them said that the only reason that there is a separation from between the races is because black people believe it to be so. Basically saying, we're not racist. You think we're racist, therefore we are. I swear to God, it sounds like something Trump would say. It's ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, this led to, like, segregation was on and popping. It's been cemented into law for the next 60 or so years. It's just us dealing with separate facilities, separate water fountains, separate schools, separate all these things, which, by the way, is super expensive and stupid. What you gonna do? I don't expect them to make sense. And this brings us to the last part. I swear to God, I'm not gonna bend your ear off. We're gonna land this plane, and it's gonna be clean. We're gonna land this plane. It's gonna be clean. So this leads us directly into the modern civil rights movement. He talks about W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, the clash that they had between the two, how they had different ideologies that were mostly grounded in the fact that they came from two different areas, because Booker T. Washington was born enslaved. He had seen how bad it could be, and he was willing to compromise on some things because he knew he'd seen where he came from, and Du Bois, who had grown up in Connecticut and was basically middle class, and he wished for more. And while history will look at Booker T. Washington not as favorably, they would look at him and be like, man, I wish you'd done things differently. I wish you had done zig when you would have zagged, or why would you give up political freedom for for economics? His viewpoint was grounded in his upbringing and his reality, what he had dealt with during that time. And ultimately, Du Bois's viewpoint is the one that will launch the modern civil rights movement. The one that we see, this idea that we're going to fight for political rights, is the exact same ideas that Du Bois that Du Bois had. And ironically, Du Bois created the Niagara movement, which was just like, because he's petty, it was designed just to hate on Booker T. Washington. Like, I don't like this dude enough that I created a whole civil rights organization just to stop him. And when it failed in 1809, it basically was the progenitor. Like, a lot of those people folded into the NAACP. So NAACP was, basically one of the very, very first mainstream civil rights organizations. But in the very beginning, it was an interracial organization. It was mostly white. It was very white. The entire executive leadership was white, except for Du Bois. And when they were putting it together, they had Ida B. Wells in the building, and they were like putting together a panel to talk about the needs of the organization, and they left her off. And she's like, whoa, wait a minute. I am the leading authority on lynching in this country. Nobody knows more about this. How are you going to talk about anything about Black people and not talk to me? So when she got left off, she felt some type of way. And originally, while she is now considered one of the founders of the NAACP, if you asked her, she probably would not say that. She'd probably be like, nah, I don't know them cats. And she had real questions about, can a Black civil rights organization be ran by white folks and their intentions. And you can see that shift in the NAACP. While it was very white early on, by the 1920s, which is just like 10 or 15 years, 1920s going to 1930s, it was majority Black. Just 20 years later, because there was this realization that it needed to come from us. So anyway, around this fourth part of the book, he starts talking about, here's a wonderful chapter. If you don't read nothing, if you don't take away nothing, you don't read a part of this book, just read the part where he talks about the women in the movement and all these powerful women in this book. He mentions Mary Ellen Pleasant, Ella Baker, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Now, granted, Sister Rosetta Tharpe's not really a civil rights figure, but she was the gave birth to rock and roll. I think there's this quote where, God, one of them, I can't remember who said it, but basically they basically insinuated that their entire career was just a Rosetta Tharpe impression. Like, I based my entire way on my sound on her, on how I wanted to be her, and this melding of electric guitar and basically gospel together. It's so wonderful. It's a great passage. My favorite person in this part, though, is Ella Baker. He talks a great deal about Ella Baker and how she was probably the most famous person from the movement that people don't talk about, and that she was responsible for the rise of every major civil rights organization during that time. We're talking about the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She was in that. She was like integral in that, and how she basically, and what soured her the most is that Ella Baker was the OG, and she knew what she was talking about. Yet when she joined the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is Martin Luther King's organization that he founded after the Montgomery Boys boycott, she took a back seat. She was basically a secretary for them. She was basically in there printing up flyers. And this is somebody who probably is knowledgeable as anybody about the methods that work within the movement, and she was sour about it. She mentions a lot. Well, one, she didn't like their very leadership heavy structure. She thought that the leadership should come from the people. That's first and foremost. But also, she felt some type of way about how it was really very male dominated, and there weren't a whole lot of women in leadership, and she was basically the only representation, and she was relegated to printing off flyers. He felt some type of way. So after the Freedom Riders, after the Freedom Riders, no, after the sit-in movement, which the anniversary of the sit-in was beginning of February, February 1st, 1960, where, in Greensboro, 4 Black students from A&T went and sat at a Woolworth lunch counter, and launched a movement. So this started the whole student movement in the United States. Like before that, this was mostly led by, they were older people, they were more established, they were more mature, and they were mostly led by preachers. Like prior to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, most of the people in the civil rights movement, and this was like 61, most of the people before that were ministers. And there was a reason for that, because ministers were not subjected to the white power structure. Most of them preached at churches that were owned by the community, and they couldn't be fired. So if I said something or I did something and you didn't like it, you would get economic reprisals. This is what happened to Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks had to move out of Montgomery because she couldn't find work, because they fired her from her job. And Claudette Colvin, who didn't even get the representation. She wasn't even on the front page, and she was still blackballed. But if you had a Black preacher, he wasn't subjected to that. He could say and do things in March and then still go preach on Sunday and it not be a problem. So this marked a bit of a shift in the movement, where you had students who also had a lot less to lose and far more to gain, because they were growing into this world and they wanted to change it. They were far more ambitious. And originally, Dr. King wanted the student division to be a part of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and Ella Baker was like, "Don't listen to him. Do your own thing. You guys should create a structure where everybody is basic democracy, where everybody can talk and do your own thing, and you work it out for yourselves." And that's what they did. And they kept her on as an advisor after she left the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, but it was mostly run by the students, by Stokely Carmichael, by John Lewis. Those guys were knuckle deep in that movement. And this is one of the reasons, like, there are a lot of books on people, and if you want to get started in reading about Black history, I highly recommend a book on Ella Baker. She's done a lot in her life, and it's a worthy read. She also had a lot of opinions that you don't really see from many people within the movement. She's one of my heroes. I enjoy her greatly. Anyway, so near the end of this book, he has a chapter about J. Edgar Hoover, but he didn't call him J. Edgar Hoover. Apparently his nickname was Speed. I had not heard that before, but he was friends with Woodrow Wilson. He kind of has an excerpt about how Woodrow Wilson was trash, and he was. And he was basically a number counter at the time when he was working with Woodrow Wilson, but he was keeping tabs on people even then. And this led to him getting in charge of the fledgling FBI. But prior to the creation of the FBI, one of the first Black people that he surveilled, one of the first people that he stopped, manipulated, fought against, tracked, was Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was J. Edgar Hoover's first target. He got in behind him, and they tailed him constantly, and they basically put him in prison for 5 years on charges of that no one could ever really prove, and then they deported him back to Jamaica. And he rode those coattails into the most powerful seat in America. Like he was the de facto leader for 4 decades. J. Edgar Hoover was untouchable. Nobody could touch him, because not only was he tailing Black leaders, he was telling everyone. He used to keep a personal log in his desk of like dirt on people, who you were having sex with, you know, were you stepping out on your wife? Were you doing this? Were you doing that? And whenever they thought about cutting off his budget, whenever they were trying to go a direction he didn't like, he would soft blackmail them. Be like, you'd be ashamed if someone found out about your gambling habits. It'd be a shame if somebody found out how you were cheating on your wife. And he stayed in power and they got funding. So he kept that in his, and then this wasn't even in the blackmail files weren't even in the central files of the FBI. He kept them things in his desk. He kept them close to him because I needed to be able to blackmail people on like, got you, I got you, I got you. And he did that to King. He sent King a suicide letter, but with that suicide letter was a tape of him in a hotel room with someone that wasn't Coretta. And basically, you know, telling him to do the right thing, that you need to go ahead and get up out of here. And they were trying to get him. This was before he earned the Nobel Peace Prize, which I think was 64, around 64. They were trying to stop him before he got the Nobel Peace Prize. And they sent this letter from the FBI. Anyway, he talks about speed and how Speed, J. Edgar Hoover, created COINTELPRO. And early in COINTELPRO, it was mostly about surveillance. And then it morphed into neutralization around 63-ish. He had been tailing King since around the Montgomery bus boycott. He was tailing him, but he was just watching him. And then around 63, they upped it and changed their tactics and decided to go with, we're going to shut you down. We're going to neutralize you. And that led into the neutralization of Malcolm, the neutralization of King, neutralization of Fred Hampton, and many other figures. But those were the main, those were the main three. And the link that you see, and I thought about this, but I couldn't prove it. The book kind of, sorry, my legs getting crinking. The book kind of linked it to me, but every single one of these people were attempting to try to not just unify Black people, but unify cross the race. So Dr. King, when he was murdered in 68, assassinated in 68, he was talking about economic freedom. He was wanting to bring people, he was trying to do his poor people's campaign, which linked, you know, racial segregation to economic segregation. He was called, everybody should come together because this is a problem, a bigger problem for all of us. You all being done wrong. You all being cheated by the system. And granted, he was focused primarily on Black people, but he was trying to bridge this gap. Malcolm, this was prior to him leaving the Nation of Islam. He had gone to Mecca. He was starting to talk about unifying people and that wanted to bridge the gap between people of color, and the things that he had said during the Nation of Islam, he kind of felt bad about, and that now he felt like that we should be more unified. Not long after that. Now, granted, Malcolm's situation was different because the Nation of Islam was actively they like I early on when I was doing this, I thought that maybe they had killed Malcolm like they killed Dr. King. My fault. But they killed Dr. King. But I think what happened is they stoked the flames within the nation to get the nation to do their work for them. And this is another tactic that they would use. They would send letters and information and things to both parties to stoke the flames in hopes that these parties will take each other out. So instead of me shooting a gun at you, I'll get your enemy to shoot the gun at you, or make you an enemy. So there's a lot of evidence that they flamed the rift between him and Elijah Muhammad. There's evidence that they flamed the rift between the Black Panthers and Ron Karenga and a U.S. organization with the Black Panthers out in California. They tried to do the same thing with Jeff Fort and the Peace Stone Rangers and Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers. So there's a history of here of them using creating rifts and then using them to take each other out. So I think that's my guess. If you're going to ask me what happened to Malcolm X, because it's at least clear that the Nation of Islam did want him dead, and they do talk about it a lot. And Farrakhan in particular has mentioned a couple times that if we had him killed, what is that of you? That is us taking out our own, dealing with our business internally. Okay. But don't think for a minute the FBI was a passive participant. They just watched this happen. They were active. And matter of fact, right before he died, he tried to get. He talks about in the book. He tried to get himself arrested because he pulled up to the police or to the FBI agents that were sitting outside. They were always outside his house, and with the gun. And granted, he was a felon. They should have taken him in, but they didn't. And this was a couple of days before he was killed in the Audubon ballroom. Just saying, they were at least aware of what was going to happen. Anyway, go ahead and land. And land this plane. The last couple of chapters are mostly about like the GI Bill, redlining, and this loss of black wealth, and how and this was interesting. This is a way I had not thought of before, that the government, state government, use your tax dollars, black tax dollars, to fund white institutions that you didn't have available to you. They were not available to you. He used South Carolina as an example because South Carolina has 6 state-funded schools, but only 1 HBCU, and even that HBCU wasn't funded by them because they got a land grant from the federal government. So to start South Carolina State, it didn't come from them. And it's basically the argument that the government was using your money not to help you, to fund everybody else, mostly the white population. Even if you didn't have a hand in it, even if you weren't involved, you were a recipient of this wealth transfer from black people, from black population, to things like the GI Bill, with things like the GI Bill, or separate but equal, and funding white institutions and things like that. So let's just talk about this entire transfer of wealth. This leads into, of course, the GI Bill, and how the GI Bill basically created the middle class, the American middle class in the 50s. And this is when Trump talks about making America great again. This is the time period. This is specifically the time period he's talking about. Right after World War II, post GI Bill, this flow of money, picket fence, 2 kids, Levittown house, no Negroes, everything is wonderful. But that world was created with the help, with the funds of black people. It was created on our back with this huge wealth transfer, this huge gap of money that was used, that was taken from us. And when you look, and I talked about this, I have a video about this. I don't remember the exact numbers, but those houses that you buy, those Levittown houses that cost $5,000 in 1954, now are worth $500,000, $600,000. That's money that you can lose to send your kids to college. That's money that you can use to start a business. That's money that you can use to just fuck around with what you have available to you. And that's the whole idea here, is that generational wealth was not, it wasn't that we didn't have it, it was stolen from us. This is one of the reasons why I am not wholly against gentrification. I am for the ability to be able to choose. If you live in a house, or you own a house, or you will a house, and you decide that you want to sell that house to a white family, and they're going to give you above market value, or give you a bunch of money, and you're willing to take that money, and this is going to give you some life-changing money, or money that you can do to do something, the things that you want to do, by all means, go have that. Enjoy, have a good time. But when you live in a neighborhood and you don't own the house, you're renting the house, and now some white landlord is selling to some hedge fund, some private equity fund, is now renting out your house It is never going to put it back on the market. And now your house is worth 3 times as much, but you were never involved in that. That's the problem. This is the problem. I want you to have the ability to choose what you want to be able to do. This in the end game, it's all about choice and agency, and I can do what I want. Now, granted, you could say, I don't want you to sell Granny's house, and I'm cool with that too. If you don't want to, don't sell it. But if you do sell it and you get a bunch of fucking money, and now you want to start a donut stand, do what you want to do with that. Have a good time. This leads into, talk about reparations and how there's actually some precedent for that. Specifically, he talks about Japanese Americans and how they were placed in internment camps during World War II, and then they was given a reparations of $25,000 afterwards. Now, granted, that's not a whole lot of money, but it's an acknowledgement. It was we fucked up. I'm sorry. We would try not to do that next time. Probably not. We're probably just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're probably going to keep doing what you're doing. And it kind of ends, the book kind of ends with basically just saying that, look at what's happened over the years. How can you argue against? I've just spent 15, 16 chapters showing you how reparations isn't a handout. It's just what we're owed. It's the bill. It's like you worked a job. I think they make a reference. It's like, what if you worked a job and you found out that your father didn't get all his money? Wouldn't you be upset? And then if you found out that this has happened over several different generations and that they owe you millions of dollars, and now wouldn't you want your money? Absolutely, because you earned it. You feel like you earned it. You work for it. That's the idea here behind reparations. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and land this plane. I do want to say that this is an amazing book. I highly, 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 highly recommend it. People have asked me in the past, like, hey, if you had a book or something that you wanted to read or that I should read to get me started, where should I start? What's the best place to start with this? And I think this is a good launching pad for people is Black AF history. It shows you a lot of history. It changes your ideas on things that you've seen. And I feel like it's a launch pad for other ideas. So, you want to read more about Black rice. There's a book specifically on Black rice, on the cultivation of rice in the Low Country and how that came from Black engineers, specifically from the Rice Coast. You want to read more? You want to read more about Ella Baker? You want to read more about Sister Rosetta Tharpe or the Southern Christian Leadership Conference or even Forrest Joe? Like, all these things are available to you, and this book opens up this wealth of ideas and the knowledge that kind of just, man, I want to learn more about this book or that book or that book or that book. I think it's a wonderful launching pad, and I highly, 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 highly recommend it. Right now, like, if you guys have any thoughts, I know I've been talking straight for an hour and change. Oh my God. I am so sorry for being in your ear like this. I don't know if anybody would stick around. I wouldn't want to hear myself, listen to myself talk for an hour straight. If you are still here, I am happy for you to be here. I hope that you learned something. If you read Black AF, I would love for you to tell me your thoughts, what you thought, what resonated with you, the themes, things like that. And I'm gonna open the floor. To you guys. Oh wow, I'm so glad that you subscribe to my Substack. My Substack is my pride and joy now. Like, the two things that I value the most in this world right now are my YouTube channel and my Substack. And if you guys want to talk to me or you like to engage with me, the place that I am the most on a day-to-day basis is on Substack. I'm always putting notes out or writing about things or talking about something, you can reach me there. I'm always there talking about something. And this is where I am the most. So, like, follow my Substack if you want to hear more from me. If you like this, you enjoy this. I'm sure you don't want to hear me talk for an hour again. I wouldn't. But hey, I appreciate you subscribing to my Substack. It's my new baby. It's my new pride and joy. Also, the next book, I think sometime around this month. I feel like it's probably going to be the 7th again. I think this lines up that the 7th ends up being the next Saturday from now. And then you can tell me what you think. Maybe you hate it, maybe you love it, but I wanted to do a classic, so I was going to read the autobiography of Malcolm X as the next book that we're going to talk about, and we're going to go over, and that we're going to lead into next month. Now, I already kind of am aware of Malcolm X's life, but this is from I create videos. I haven't read the book specifically. I haven't read it in his own words, in his own terms, and I'm very curious to read more about his life post Nation of Islam and after the Nation of Islam, because I think a lot of that, shapes the kind of person that he was. And I know that a lot of his life was built on tragedy, and it's super interesting, at least to me. I find it interesting. I would like to know what you guys think about the idea of doing a classic like Malcolm X. But I think it's fine. I mean, I got time. If you got a book, if you want to reference a book, you want to add a book, want a book that you want us to read in the future, I'm fine with that too. I will put that on the list. I have a bunch of books that people have recommended to me over the past couple of weeks, and I'm keeping a list of things so that I can know going into the next month, hey, maybe we're gonna do this and try to switch up things and change up things, shift it a bit so that we could do a total viewpoint. And one of the other creators on Substack mentioned that I need to venture outside of the Black American space and look more towards the diaspora. And she's not wrong. She's not wrong. So that's the next idea. The next idea is to possibly go and look into the Haitian Revolution. And the book, and Black AF talks about this. It has a whole excerpt on this. I kind of glossed over that, because I can't give you everything that was in the book. But he does have an entire passage, an entire chapter on the Haitian Revolution and its effect on the United States. And that's one of the things that's awesome about is because how close it was to the United States, it terrified the shit out of them. And that is where I want to see more, want to learn more about, not just the revolution, but its revolution's effect on revolution's effect on the United States. I think so too. I think he's extremely important. And also, and this is what I like about Malcolm, and in regard to the first book we read, which was Radio Free Dixie, is that he was not subject to the modern civil rights movement. He was doing his own thing, and he would question it. And one of the things that we kind of ingrained in ourselves in 2026 is that the civil rights movement is unfathomable, that we can't question it and say, hey, that probably was a misstep. I would have zigged, you zigged when I would have zagged. I think for me, that makes us more human. The fact that we made missteps along the way is more human. It makes doing protests today seem more reasonable when you realize they weren't infallible. They were just kind of doing their own thing. They were kind of doing what they felt right in the moment, and that's great. I think so too. I like this idea about talking about the Haitian Revolution. My only problem about reading about the Haitian Revolution is I suck at French names, and I know I'm going to butcher a book full of names. I already know it. I already know that I'm going to butcher a book full of names, and I'm going to look it up, try how to say this person's name, and it is going to be something I'm like, I can't say. My tongue does not make that sound, sir. Oh man, I would love to know to see that conversation. I would love to be involved in that conversation. That's super interesting that you have a person that's a teacher in Haiti. What does that say? I can't read it. I hope not. Please don't. I'm gonna butcher some names. It's okay if I butcher some guys' names, because I'm gonna still give you the history in between it. It's gonna be bad. It's probably be bad. A couple of them I know. Like Toussaint, I'm aware of. I can say that. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. But some of those names, even within the book, I was like, kind of like Game of Thrones. Like, I don't know, how do you say that? And then you'd hear it, you're like, that's not the way that was in my head. I just make it up name. Blue hair dude. Black guy, Haitian man, guy with a French name. So yeah. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and land this plane. It's been a solid hour. I thank all of you guys. We had a great turnout today. We had a solid like 30, 35, 40 people. I really appreciate everybody that shows up to these live streams. I know that kind of infrequent, and a little bit that kind of different from the way the rest of my channel is set up. I know my channel on my channel, I'm usually doing Black history stories, and I'm not camera facing, and a lot of those stories are like kind of siloed in their own thing. And this book club is one trying to get me outside and have me talking to people and to show you that one, I'm a real person in a world full of AI, that I am a human being, that I am a human being, and two, that hey, I want to read more. I want to read outside. I want to see more. I want to be educated on things and not just um like what I need for this story. Like a lot of times what happens is I read these stories and they're very siloed. I just read what I need to do my script and then I move on with it. But what you find when you read, this is why reading is so important. What you find when you read is there are all these narratives and all these things that you missed, that you don't see, that you don't know because you didn't read the entire book. Like Radio Free Dixie is full of those moments. If I had just done a story on Robert F. Williams, I would have just done like, hey, he did this and he did and he had the black guard and they was waiting for police, they were waiting for the Klan, and they shot out with the Klan, and he was awesome. What you don't realize is that that's not him in his totality. And he was always preaching self-defense. He was, the entire story is always about how can we protect ourselves. Like Malcolm X talks about how nonviolence leaves us defenseless, or Robert Williams has this great quote, that nonviolence is only a successful method if your opponent has a conscience. It is not a proper method for a sadist. Like that stuff, I get it. There has to be this threat. And when you have people that like are a threat or a problem, it makes people like Martin Luther King look more acceptable. I am more willing to deal with Martin Luther King because Robert F. Williams and Malcolm are crazy. That they're over here in the corner, rifle in hand. That's the kind of stuff. Those are the stories that I enjoy, that you should read and we should read, because it gives you a total picture. And also, before I get off here, I will talk your head off about history all day. I'm sorry. One of the things you find out is that the 50s leading up into the modern civil rights movement was a mess. They didn't know which way they were going. They were filling themselves out during the 50s. Like there's this narrative that Emmett Till died, they murdered Emmett Till, and then we were like, hell no, we're not gonna take this no more. We're marching in the streets until we get our rights. And that's just not the way it was. It was a continuous fight. And even into the 50s, there were a lot of people who were like, yeah, this is bull, this is trash, we struggling. No, I haven't. But now that you brought her up, I am going to. Yes, I do have a book. I have a link. I'm gonna just give you the Amazon link because I think I got it up right quick. Oh, hang on. I think it's just the Alex Haley joint though. Yeah, here it is. I think they have an audiobook. Audiobook is free. Oh, that's awesome. Sorry. But yeah, there's this idea that we woke up one day and we decided that we were going to start protesting, and that's just not the way it was. We were feeling our way through the entire movement, and there were a lot of times where we thought maybe this self-defense model was a way. We kind of had to be, hey, do I keep this in my back pocket because I possibly might need it? Like Malcolm, even Martin had to be convinced not to. He had to be talked out of. He applied for a handgun permit. When Bayard Rustin showed up to his house, he said it was like an armory because he had armed guards out front and he had guns out and about. Bayard Rustin said, I sat on one. I sat on a gun. That's what we're talking about. So like this idea that he was always about, turn the other cheek, he had to be talked into that. I had to imagine, like, I don't know what the discussion was like, but it could not have been me. It could have been me. I'm just saying. He's better. He's a better man than me. He was He was knuckle deep in nonviolence, and I don't understand how he got there. Like, he got stabbed, and after he got stabbed, he was like, "This just, renews my conviction in nonviolence." I was like, "Are you sure? Because you were just 6 inches from dying, and now you're more secured in this." Hey, man, that's how you know he's an OG. He was like, they firebombed his house, 1957. They firebombed his house. Wife and baby, newborn baby was in the house when it got firebombed. And granted, of course, they were okay. They made it out, but mob showed up, not to hurt him. They were getting ready to burn down Montgomery. He was in Montgomery at the time. The police chief showed up. He was like, chill. He couldn't do nothing with him. The crowd. He had to like, chill. Y'all need to chill out. Martin came out. He's like, yo, it's okay. If I die, the movement will carry on. We're gonna meet. We're gonna meet violence with grace or something to that effect. It was like, bro, you serious? They tried to firebomb your wife and kids in the house. Are you sure? Now, granted, right after that, he applied for a handgun permit, but still, the ability to go outside and not be like, burn this motherfucker down. Every house. Good luck. Y'all have a good time. Good night. I mean, I'm sure he felt that way. Positive. Like that restraint couldn't be me. Absolutely not. Couldn't be me. Anyway. All right, guys. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm gonna look, like, as soon as I get off this live, I'm gonna look up to it. Do not be surprised if you see me put up a note in the coming days about Millie Moon. If it's super interesting, this is what I love. Especially people that are not, like, one of the things I'm big on now these days is showing people in a light that they haven't seen us before in, or taking like Titans and someone like Harry Belafonte or Sammy Davis Jr. or Martin Luther King, and then showing them in a light that you've never seen them before in, or people that people have never heard of before. Like, hey, oh my God, I've never heard of this woman before. This is super interesting. I didn't know she did that. I didn't know that they did this. This is why you start to get into guys like Robert F. Williams or the Deacons of Defense, because people I had no idea that these stories existed. And now this person is showing me that this person was integral. Like, we have so much history out here that is far more than just Martin Luther King, and we need to showcase that. We need to put a thing on that. So this month, I'm gonna do notes. I'm gonna do notes all this month, basically about Black history. I've been doing it anyway, but like, it's a big focus. I'm going hard for Black History Month. Going into the next month, I'm probably just going to continue that thing, Women History Month, and start doing like women of the movement, stories about Black women specifically. It's going to be dope. It's going to be super dope. That's the plan anyway, and we'll see where that stuff where it takes me. Yes, I know his house. His house was firebombed too. This is where, like, especially near the end, when he thought he was going. He thought, I think his house was also firebombed as a child. But I think I know they lived in Nebraska, and I think that house in Nebraska, because his mother and father were heavy in Marcus Garvey's civil rights movement, and they found out about it, and it was a subgroup of the Ku Klux Klan. I think they firebombed his home, and then later, after they moved, they also his dad accidentally died in a he gets hit by a train, and they heavily insinuate, like, there's no evidence, or at least I haven't seen any evidence presented that he was murdered by, I think they called it the Black Legion. He was murdered by the Black Legion, but his house was also firebombed, and his father was killed by a Ku Klux Klan offshoot. And from there, his mother was committed to an asylum. So his early life was very tragic. It was a lot. He had a lot going on. This is what led to this life of crime, because he had seen a lot. Like, how do you come out a turn into the person he turned into, a man that they said is above reproach, when your entire upbringing is all tragedy, where you separated from your siblings, your mom is committed, your dad is dead, you moved several times because the Klan has firebombed your house. You heavily insinuated that they killed your father. Like, how do you fix that? How do you fix that in your head? Like, how do you become a productive citizen in society after that? How are you not a criminal? how do you become the man later on that is now above reproach? That's what the FBI said about him. They said he was a man of this is an informant, FBI informant, high moral status, who is above reproach. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, and he was never late for a meeting. Like that. Like people ask me why I love Malcolm X so much, because not only did he talk the talk, but he walked the walk. He walked, those ideals that they preach about the nation, he was in it. This is why he was so sad when he found out about what happened with Elijah Muhammad, because he was living. I was in it. He was in it. I'm knuckle deep. I'm knuckle deep. I believe what you're saying. So anyway, I ain't gonna bend down in. I talk about this all day. It's been an hour and 30 minutes. I was sitting talking to myself for an hour and 30 minutes in the mirror like a crazy person. I like to thank y'all for all coming out. All of you guys that came through, man. You guys are so awesome. And especially in the comments, I'm so glad that you guys are here. If you're on Substack, I am so sorry. I tried my best to be able to see the comments, and it was reverberating and it was bad. I'm gonna fix it though. I also have, I don't know if you guys are on my Substack, I did a live stream this week with Anthony Milan and with Ernest Graham. Those also two other Black creators. That is on their channels. I will try to take those videos and put them, make them available on my Substack, just so if you're there, you can read it. If you're not, connected with them, if you're not connected with them. I'm trying to get more into the economics. I think that's the biggest thing that we have that we don't talk about, is not only that the struggle, but how to fund the struggle, and how we created our own things, and how we fought and had did our own things outside the white gaze. Like when I talk about Durham, the Durham Black Wall Street, that was done mostly on our own. When you talk about Mound Bayou, that was done mostly on our own. Oh man, my son is having a moment. So anyway, sorry about that. I got sidetracked slightly. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and land this plane. Thank y'all for coming out. I'm gonna try to do more of a series. If you're connected to my Substack, I have another live stream with another Black creator coming up for Black History Month. It's another thing I'm trying to do, is talk to more Black creators in this space about during Black History Month. We're gonna chop it up, and I'm gonna try to make the other ones available on my channel, just so if you haven't seen them, you're not friends with them, you can see it from me. And yeah, stay tuned. February is my month. I gotta go hard. I gotta do some work. I thank y'all all for coming out. This has been so wonderful. I did not mean to talk for an hour and 30 minutes, but I love you all. Thank you for coming out. Peace.